Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my latest edition of Miami Hurricanes Talk with Danny on Anchor. My guest this week is Ken. Let me see if I pronounce this right. Sugiura, right?
Yeah, there you go. Sugiura. Yeah.
Sugiura from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He's the beat writer for Georgia Tech. We're going to preview the game this week in Atlanta. 3:30 will be on ACC, regional networks, RSNs. If you go check your distance in your area. Ken, good afternoon. Thank you for coming back on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Ken, I looked at a couple things, and I saw tape just before I came on here. I
Mhm.
looked at Zach Pylon, and I was very impressed at how he was last week against Virginia Tech. 319 total yards, 2 touchdowns rushing. Um, what makes this kid so impressive?
A few things. One, I mean, he's a freshman and he doesn't play like one. One thing I've noticed, you often see freshman quarterbacks, they're getting delayed games and they're having to burn timeouts and they're gunning the ball or getting out of the pocket at the first sign of pressure. And he doesn't do any of those things really, or he hasn't yet. He's poised. He stands in against a pass rush. He throws accurately. He seems to have a good sense of how plays are supposed to develop. And he's a tough kid. He runs hard, fights for tough yards, and I think that's also won him the affections, I guess, of his teammates. So there's a lot of things to like about the way he's played so far for sure.
Yeah, right now Georgia Tech's a 2-point favorite, over under 46. When I looked at this season for us, when the season started, Ken, everyone was looking at
Right.
for us this game being a potential trap game before the big one against Clemson next week. My God, things have changed in 8 months.
Right. Yeah. I mean, certainly, the offseason that Miami had, you certainly thought that things were going to take off. And obviously, it remains to be seen how the rest of this season and obviously, the incoming years of Mario Cristobal are going to go. But yeah, Georgia Tech has kind of steadied itself a little bit after firing Jeff Collins, and obviously Miami's having
Yeah,
their own troubles.
yeah, I was going to ask about that. Have you heard anything about the coaching search there? I mean, is Dion still a player to watch there, or no? Or is that ship
I
sailing a little bit more?
I haven't heard a ton of really anything to concrete. Obviously, a lot of people throw around a lot of different names. Certainly, Deion Sanders has been one of them. My sense is he's probably not going to be a strong candidate, but I would think he'll be considered. But as far as actually knowing anything, certain, unfortunately, I mean, I know, certainly we know that Brent Key is a candidate to some degree, but beyond that, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I look at Brent Key. I mean, Brent Key, given what he's done a pretty good job over there in Atlanta. I mean, the thing for me when I looked at Georgia Tech's their defense. I mean,
Mhm.
last week they did a pretty good job, and they came up big at the end against Virginia Tech.
Right. Yeah, yeah. They offense wasn't doing a ton, and special teams they've given up a touchdown on a punt return, and so the defense was really in position to have to kind of win the game a little bit, and they came up with 3 turnovers in the last quarter to turn the tide, and yeah, it's looking at the numbers, looking at the way they play, it's a very different group than what you saw. Certainly last year and earlier this part of the year, they play faster, you know, forcing a lot of turnovers, playing well on third down. I mean, obviously the Florida State game is a huge exception to all that, but yeah, it's been a good group for
I
sure.
mean, last week when we played FSU, I mean, everything went that could go wrong for us did go wrong.
Mhm.
45-3, FSU beat Miami in Hard Rock Stadium. I mean, like I said, that's the exception, but Miami has not scored a touchdown in 9 quarters. That's been a
Right.
big deal. In fact, and what do you think? What is Georgia Tech doing this week to prepare for Ja'Cory Brown?
Well, I mean, I don't know that they're convinced that he's going to be the guy. I think certainly they're preparing for him and they're aware that he can run and make plays with his feet. One thing Daquan Dowse, who's the defensive tackle, said is they know about all three and know what they can do, but it's hard to obviously just prepare for one if you don't know quite what's coming.
We know when okay, Marshall Tom. Okay, you want to take a little question? We have a question from Marshall Thomas. Marshall, do you have a question for Ken?
Hey, how you guys doing? Give me just give me a sec. Y'all
Sure.
could keep talking. I just jumped on.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing I want to look at when I look at Georgia Tech, I mean,
Uh-huh.
their pass offense is the worst in the ACC, only averaging 185 yards a game and nearly six
Mhm.
an attempt. And Miami's not much better. And remember, not going Van Dyke's likely done for the year. So
Right.
have they also prepared for possibly Jake Garcia as well?
I think so. I mean, I think, obviously Miami's not dropping a lot of hints about what's going to happen. And, maybe they're going to think that they're going to see Ja'Cory Brown, but I'm sure they're going to prepare for both, and, potentially even Van Dyke too. I mean, my sense of it is like you're saying, I would be surprised if he played, but I don't think coaches are, they're not going to, gamble on something like that.
No, definitely not. Look at in the ACC, Georgia Tech is 13th in the conference, averaging 16 a game against Power 5 conferences opponents. Miami is, well, did you know the Miami Hurricanes are dead last in the conference against these teams? 15.2. That is incredible. I mean, our defense is when we've won, it's been on defense. 11.5 points a game and allowing 35.8 in losses. When Georgia Tech has lost, they've allowed 33.4 points a game and 21.3 when they've won. So I think I expect a low scoring game. Is that the sense you get, Ken?
I would think so. I mean, Georgia Tech has obviously had its struggles, scoring certainly earlier in the year and still to this point. So I would, we'll see what Miami shows up defensively, but I would think the same thing, that it's probably going to be a game in the 20s or something like that.
Marshall, whenever you want to hop on, go ahead. If you have a question you want to hop on again, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that it's been kind of a crazy year for Georgia Tech, firing the coach in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Were you surprised though to see the team kind of fight back, get a win against Pitt, get a comeback win at Virginia Tech? Have you been impressed with the resilience, I'd say?
Yeah. I was. I mean, if you look back at the time, Pitt was, I think they were 24th in the country and defending ACC champions and all that, and playing, in their field, and I think had something like a 3-game winning streak against Georgia Tech. So I had no expectations that Tech would win that game or necessarily show this, like you're saying, the resilience they have. I think we talked about Brent Key earlier, the interim head coach. I think he's done a really nice job in that regards of kind of clearing guys' heads and giving them a clear message about, here's how we want you to play, and let's just worry about winning games and not some of the other extraneous stuff that had kind of defined what Jeff Collins' tenure was about a little bit. So yeah, they're it's not a great team by any stretch, but they're making fewer mistakes and playing faster and seem to have a lot of energy and playing with just enjoying playing. So I think that's something you're really seeing.
I think we have to look at it. Go ahead, Marshall.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead, Marshall. I know you want to follow up. Go ahead.
So do you expect Zach Pyron to start on Saturday?
What I'll start with what Brent Key has said is that it's, Jeff Sims has practiced. He actually practiced last week and didn't play. And so it doesn't necessarily mean because he's practicing doesn't mean he will play Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach started, but I'm not, 100% convinced that's what's going to happen.
What is Sims' injury, or what? How long has he been out?
He sprained his foot against Virginia, which was, I guess, 3 games ago now. He actually he hurt it in the second quarter, I guess, and didn't come back, and then didn't play against Florida State or Virginia Tech.
Okay. So what should Hurricanes fans be expecting to see from the Georgia Tech offense? Because, I mean, for years, this team gave me nightmares with the triple option.
Right.
Obviously, it's not, the Reggie Ball and those kind of players to Shard Choice. Mm-hmm. What should Hurricanes fans be expecting to see from the Tech offense?
They like to run the ball first. I mean, I think you'd say the strength of their team, the strongest position group is the running back group. Dante Smith and Hassan Hall in particular. Certainly they've shown a little more ability passing the ball with Zach Pyron, and he's particularly the last game they was much more effective. But yeah, it's an offensive line that's not the strongest, but they try to go side to side. There's probably more of their strength, but it's pretty straightforward offense. Actually, and I think it was Kevin Steele. I was listening to that press conference. He said it's a fairly similar scheme to what Florida State and also was Virginia Tech, I guess, have done. So it's nothing out of the ordinary, but I think it's something I probably see a lot of if they're going to play the way they want to play, they're going to be a lot of running or more leaning on the run game, I think.
Yeah, I think I look at also as the big play receivers, Carter and Jenkins. They have big Jenkins 17-9 a grab, Carter 15. And Marshall, you can attest this too. The pass defense has been absolutely abysmal at times this year.
Yes, very, very much up and down. It looked elite against Texas A&M, and then we made Middle Tennessee State look like LSU a few years ago.
Yeah. So what do we expect from Jenkins and Carter to hit that point?
Well, yeah, they're more down the field threats. Jenkins is he's 6'7", I think. Malachi Carter, good route runner, good in the air. The guy they looked for the most is Nate McCollum. He's a slot receiver, quick and shifty and able to make catches over the middle. So he's the guy that both Jeff Sims and Zach Parn have looked for the most.
Yeah, when I look at defense, Georgia Tech's defense, they have a pretty good defender in Charlie Thomas, and that will be an issue for our offensive line, which, if I'm not mistaken, Marshall, isn't our offensive line banged up a bit?
Just a bit. I mean, I think we have our original 4 starters out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
From fall camp or the start of the season. So we are literally limping into Atlanta.
Yeah. And I was telling Marshall, when the season started, everyone thought this was going to be a trap game before the big one next week at Clemson. Boy, I was telling how things have changed.
I've always looked at Georgia Tech as a trap game for the Hurricanes, because ever since I was a kid, like, we have struggled against them, especially in Atlanta. So I never take the Yellow Jackets for granted, man. And I'm excited to see what you. I mean, I don't want you to get too into this, but obviously there's going to be a head coaching search. Has that really started to ramp up yet, or?
A little bit. I mean, I think, they hired a new athletic director actually the same time when they fired Jeff Collins. So Jay Batt,
Alabama guy?
Say it again?
Was it the new athletic director, or was it the guy from Alabama?
Right, yeah, Jay Batt, yes. So he was hired, I guess, 3 weeks ago now, or he started 3 weeks ago. It's his search to run. I'm sure at this point, they're doing a lot of kind of back channel stuff and agents talking to search firms, that sort of thing. My guess is it'll be done fairly quickly after the season end, whether it's Brent Key or someone else coming from outside. But I'm sure, in a kind of on a under the radar level, it's been going on pretty. I'm sure there's been a lot going on.
Yeah, I've looked at the passes Georgia Tech has picked off. They picked off 10 this year, and they've done a solid job forcing turnovers, with mostly on the fumbles end. And we've had our issues with fumbleitis this year. I mean, and this may be the team that GT turns the corner against. And when you look at Samari Wilson and Miles Brooks, they've combined for 11 pass breakups and 3 picks this year. See, but Georgia Tech has a habit of getting whipped at the line of scrimmage. And what have they done to try to prepare for Ja'Cory Brown? Because no, it's not just a gimmick practice. The guy can sling the ball around too.
Right. I mean, I'm sure they've watched all the tape and are well aware of what he can do. That he's a versatile player and dangerous in a lot of ways. So as far as specifics, it's hard to know. But yeah, it's a good pass. It's a good secondary. They play a lot of man, which I think has enabled them to get the breakups they have. And it's a team that I think it's a secondary that I think plays well as a unit, and it's fairly young, not the most experienced, but they've done far better, I think, most people would have thought this year. Yeah,
the run defense for Georgia Tech hasn't done that well this year.
I think it's gotten better. I think, at the beginning of the year, particularly when they played Ole Miss, it didn't do well. They had some trouble obviously against Florida State. It's again on the front side. I think kind of they're willing to bend and not break. I think is kind of what I've heard about them a little bit. But yeah, I would say they're probably stronger against the pass than they are against the run.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's the key. Marsh, you want to add something to that also?
Hold on, I have to send an email real quick. You can ask it. Danny.
Okay, another question I want to ask is, but my keys to the game. I'm going to give you my keys to the game, and Ken, I want to give yours as well.
Okay.
One, we have to keep one for Miami to win. They got to keep the pressure on Pyron. But Pyron is not the typical freshman, like you said. And our defense, Miami's defense has logged a lot of sacks this year, and the pressure has to be on in this game. Number two, for Miami to win, run the football. You know, Parrish, Stank, Thad, and Knighton all averaging 4 a carry, 9 combined TDs. But Miami's problem is not being able to run the football. And that's been an issue with our offensive coordinator, Josh Gaddis, who came over from Michigan. A lot of our fan base down here is really ripping into Gaddis. Ripping into Gaddis. But for Georgia, Tech's not Clemson, the team we play next week. For Miami to win, they got to make Ja'Cory Brown a factor as well and get his running game going. And also be better at special teams. Be less bad than Georgia Tech on special teams. Because special teams I saw last week, the special teams defense was terrible. But 15 to 18 on field goals, perfect on PATs. You know, their kicker is perfect on field goals, which is Gavin Stewart. So do you trust Tech in a close game if it comes down to Stewart?
I would say so. I mean, he hasn't given any reason to not. I don't know that he's been in a situation where he's had to make, a kick with a game on the line, if memory serves. But yeah, everything he kind of sense about him makes me feel like, yeah, he
all right.
Like
those are my 3 keys. Want to get your 3 keys, Ken?
Sure. Well, I think to copy one of yours, I think when Tech is done well, they've run the ball well. The 2 previous games against Virginia and Virginia Tech before they beat Florida State and Virginia before they beat Virginia Tech. They weren't running the ball well. They got better against Virginia Tech. I think that was a big part of it. I think that's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. They run first and they can't do well there. I think that puts a lot of pressure on Pyron to kind of piggyback on what you were saying. Other thing is, turnovers. It's an area where they've done really, really well, not only just with takeaways, but in holding on to it. And so, I think it's a game that, if you can hold on to it and let the offense, win field possession or use special teams to win field position, I think that'll be their benefit. And the other thing is, their special teams. It's funny to bring that up. They've been kind of suspect in punt return and in punt coverage. They're against Virginia Tech. They gave up 188 yards in punt return yardage, which is almost unheard of. And it's an area where that was a problem before, and that they were getting punts blocked, and so they changed the schemes up. But now they've kind of opened up another leak. So that's something else that I think Georgia Tech needs to be mindful of. And I think the other thing too, it kind of speaks to where I think Miami has an advantage almost against anybody, is just having better athletes and better talent. And certainly punt return, special teams is a place where you can see that happen. So I think that area generally, in keeping the punt return, but also I guess kick return to the degree that Tech has allowed that to happen, they've done a good job with it. That's probably an area where they need to win to have a better chance to beat Miami.
Marshall, what are your 3 keys to the game?
My 3 keys to the game is limit big plays, stop the run, and honestly, this is going to sound so dumb, but just score. I mean, we haven't scored a touchdown in 9 quarters.
9 quarters, as a matter of fact.
And so I think if this offense, I mean, we saw against Virginia, like we put up 4 field goals and we won in quadruple overtime without scoring a touchdown. And I think it'll be a low scoring game, but yeah, we just can't. The run defense has got to improve from last week, and I think Georgia Tech's going to try to exploit that. It's kind of it's a very interesting game coming off a 45-3 loss, but yeah, I mean, and also limit turnovers. I mean, because that has killed us time and time and again this year, right, Danny?
Yeah, definitely has, and that's killed us basically. And points off turnovers, absolutely off. Our turnovers have killed us this year. I mean, this is my thing. So now I'm going to let you guys out of here with this. We're going to start with Ken. I think didn't you? I don't know. Ken, we'll start with you on a prediction.
Oh man. I don't know. I mean, I think, like I said, I think it'll be low scoring, and I said 20s. I think maybe that's high. I it's a tough game for me to assess just because I think it's easy to see like, oh, well, Miami just got decimated by Florida State. Surely Georgia Tech's a better team. They just won, but I think the way this division is played and the way Georgia Tech can play, just because they're favored doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, particularly when it's not by much. So, I think they're going to win, but I think it's going to be close.
Okay, Marsh, your prediction.
I say Miami wins 17-13
You know,
in a boring game.
yeah, yeah. Here's the way I look at this. Which Miami, we know, and Marsh can attest to this. Miami got blown out last Saturday night at home by FSU. They showed no fight, they showed no heart, and they showed no courage. I want to see what Miami team shows up in Atlanta on Saturday. Is it the Miami team that is checked out for the rest of the year? Or is this Miami team have fight left to come back off, to get off the deck from an embarrassment like that at home and win on the road? No, let's know what it is. Marsh, you can attest to this. If Miami doesn't win this game, Miami will not go bowling this year. Okay, let's get that out of the way now, because you got Clemson next week and then Pittsburgh at home to close the regular season. For Miami, it is a must-win game. This is a real gut check game, and I say Miami finds a way to get it done in Atlanta. I'm going to go Miami 21, Georgia Tech 17. That's my prediction. Gentlemen, Ken, I want to take this time to thank you for coming on. Marsh, thanks you for coming on as well. I hope, hey, we're going to see each other a little less because of the new format starting next year.
That's right. Yeah.
So you do come to Hard Rock next year.
All right. Do they play next year? I should know. But...
Yes, it'll come to Hard Rock. You'll come to Hard Rock next year. I did see that.
All right.
All right. So Ken,
Awesome.
thank you again very much for coming on. Marshall, again, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Talking to you, Ken.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Let me just end the recording. Where is it? Okay, recording is going to stop right there.